Hello, everybody. Today's episode is with Kavita Gupta from ConsenSys Ventures, and we talk about we talk about a lot of interesting things, but two of the most interesting things that we talk about are, one, this concept of the native protocol funds, which I've chatted about before with people like Brayton Williams, and the idea there is that when you make a protocol or a platform, the person who makes that protocol or platform then funds people to build apps and things on top of that platform, and that's a complementary thing where the more apps there are, the better the platform does, and the more that the platform gets better, then the more the apps do, essentially. So it's a complementary system. Essentially, imagine your iPhone as a platform and then all the apps. The more apps, the better, and the better the iPhone is, the better for the apps. So that concept is one that we talk about here, and is one that Kavita agrees with around ConsenSys Ventures, but also that ConsenSys Ventures is kind of a new kind of API between ConsenSys and the world. And with that mindset, I think that API mindset is just a crucial one that I've talked about before, and something that people think about a lot in the blockchain space, where you essentially imagine the rest of the world as a series of APIs that you can interact with. And so I think about this as like, kind of smart contracts on the shelf or something like that, or hyper systemification or hyper notification. Another version of this is where you actually make pledges and where you show kind of your direction, not just like the APIs that someone can interact with. And so this way of thinking is both very powerful because it kind of makes things a lot quicker when everybody is an API with respect to each other, but the shadow quality of it is that you think of yourself and you think of others as just nodes within the system, so don't do that. Remember that you're still human. And then the other thing that Kavita and I touch on a lot is this idea of co-evolution and co-opetition rather than just pure competition, and this is something that like Daniel Schmachtenberger would call Omni-Consideration, where you're thinking from the system level, not just from the individual level. And Kavita and I talk about three different versions of this. One is how she's looking for startups that benefit both ConsenSys but also the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole. The second thing is, she looks for like other venture capitalists that are thinking about co-evolving with each other, so not just thinking from a scarcity kind of self mindset, but saying, hey, how can we collaborate and combine on things? And there's actually a really good example of this where Alexander Lang got a bunch of crypto VCs together and they all combined on a crowdsourced due diligence framework. So that's a really cool concept. And then another example of this is co-evolving at the entrepreneur level. And so Kavita looks for entrepreneurs that are looking to co-evolve with each other and not just not need to build all parts of the stack, but can actively be early adopters of other parts of the ecosystem. Cool. So with that, I hope you enjoy the show today with Kavita. And one final note is that a bunch of ConsenSys folks will be at ETH Denver. Kavita won't be there, but Joseph Lubin will be there, and Kevin Owaki from Gitcoin will be doing this really cool bounties track. So yeah, there's going to be a bunch of ConsenSys folks at Ethereum Denver on February 16th through 18th, helping people build apps on the Ethereum blockchain. So hope to see you there, and enjoy today's episode with Kavita. Hello, everybody. My name is Reese Lindmark, and you're listening to another episode of Creating a Humanist Blockchain Future. In this podcast, we take a systems thinking approach to doing good in the world, and we have a couple different series that focus on different system scopes. And today we're focusing on Series A, macro systems, where these are humanity-level systems and venture capital, philosophical macro trends, where we ask the question, where are we as humanity headed? And today, I'm very happy to chat with Kavita Gupta, and Kavita is a founding managing partner at ConsenSys Capital, a VC fund that invests in the Ethereum ecosystem. Kavita, thanks for being on the show and welcome.
Thank you so much, Reese, for having me. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everybody. So, Kavita, could you just give us kind of an high-level intro to ConsenSys Capital?
Sure. So I'll start with a little bit of ConsenSys and connect the dots. So ConsenSys was founded by Joseph Lubin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, with Vitalik in 2015. And the company has been always focused to create the ecosystem around Ethereum. When the new technology came, how you going to get a lot of people adopt to it? The best way is to create a lot of applications, protocol layer, infrastructure layer products, so that can be attached to create a lot of consumer and business level applications. And that's how ConsenSys started. So earlier this year, ConsenSys Capital, which is more towards the financial service arm of ConsenSys, was established. There are three different vectors within ConsenSys Capital. The first one is the asset management services. The second one is Token Foundry. And the third one, which I lead, is ConsenSys Ventures. We started with a proprietary $50 million fund to invest in pre-seed and seed stage equity. But where do we do the twist is we also do invest in tokens, usually pre-sale tokens. So it's sort of like a venture hedge fund where we also have our in-house uh, trading desk to maintain our liquidity and our position on the token side.
Got it. So yeah, it's both on the equity side and the token side, and as you say, it's part of this kind of macro thing within ConsenSys around both ConsenSys Ventures itself, and then something like Token Foundry. And I'm actually interviewing Harrison next week, so
Awesome.
we'll get all the different texture around this. So, thinking a little bit more about ConsenSys Capital and or ConsenSys Ventures rather, could you tell me more about, people think about blockchain investing and cryptocurrency investing, but then specifically, is ConsenSys Ventures focused on Ethereum? And if so, how does that change your mindset towards investing?
So we only invest in Ethereum blockchain. And I think, of course, one of the reason is that it is a consensus proprietary fund. But also, I think from the visionary perspective, if you look at any blockchain ecosystem in the market, Ethereum is the only one which has the maximum number of developers. And ultimately, the more developers are going to lead to more applications and more adoption. So most of the projects, 95 to 98% of the projects which come our way, are always on Ethereum, have an ERC20 tokens attached to it and respective wallets. So the ecosystem is too big of Ethereum within a blockchain system that we actually end up investing or getting a lot of deals which are very diversified within that blockchain.
Hmm. Yeah, and does it, so it's concentrated on Ethereum. As you say, the amount of developers on the platform is just incredible, both at the protocol level with, working on things like scaling and at the application level, and building on top of things like Truffle and MetaMask and Infura and whatever. So one kind of further subset here, there's the blockchain, and then there's Ethereum, and then even subsetter to that is ConsenSys. Could you tell me about how being part of ConsenSys changes how you do investing?
Um, I think consensus doesn't really change once we go to the Ethereum layer, how to do investing. But what it helps is providing us a big ecosystem for our portfolio companies. So we never invest just from the side of playing or providing liquidity to any of the companies. We only invest in companies where we very strongly believe that using the international ecosystem of consensus with presence over 25, 28 countries, a lot of local offices, um, plus all the protocol infrastructure layer projects which we already have at consensus, like UPut for identity. You already talk about MetaMask, Truffle. Then similarly, like we have our own in-house security products and everything.
Mhm.
So how do we create that whole ecosystem to support this company to accelerate and go to next stage very quickly? And how is that company supporting the overall Ethereum blockchain ecosystem and not just consensus? So for me, it's a strategic role play then to actually alter any type of thinking behind investing.
Got it. Yeah, and I think that, as you say there, I think that everybody should be having this in their mind as they go forward and try to like create value in the world is, let's do this for, myself and my people, whoever that may be, whether it's your city or your friends and family or the people who you work with. But then, and that's like consensus in this model, but then also, as you said there, also be aware of the general Ethereum community and say, hey, how can these consensus projects also help the Ethereum community more generally? So kind of going on that, I feel like consensus is a good example of what's called these like native protocol funds, or what some people call like VC 3.0, or like the community token economy, which are just where you have these funds that are kind of built on top of a protocol platform. With another example here being like Blockstack, and they have a $25 million fund for people to build things on top of Blockstack. Is that kind of how you view Consensus Capital, is as like a fund to like a native protocol fund for Ethereum?
I think that is what consensus was in 2015, which
Hmm.
is like Joe thinking that let's get the best developers, let's get the best application going, and ConsenSys is going to bankroll it. And we call them Spoke. So I
Yeah.
think it started 2 years back, very early on. ConsenSys was and is the leader in the community for that. And they have put out more than like 18 to 20 projects over time along the same line. When I compare ventures, I think ventures got an extended arm where we are like, now the community has already gone to a next level where a lot of experienced entrepreneurs with deep technology knowledge and also able to bring in the community of project managers, UX, UI designers, product people together to create a company without a very deep involvement from ConsenSys. But we still believe in those products. So, how to stay connected with them with 5%, 10%, whatever equity, and give them the strategic role play, but help them to take this ecosystem to the next level. So, I think ventures is the extension of the example you gave.
Great, that makes sense. And I love that version of things, which is what does the API look like between the kind of hub and these various spokes? And what you're saying is this is kind of new experimentation on these kinds of APIs that ConsenSys can have with spokes and with projects and with the general Ethereum community. So that makes sense and kind of understanding where ConsenSys and ConsenSys Capital fit in the ecosystem. How now talking about you have a background in social good and impact investing and social entrepreneurship, and actually Kavita and I before the show were talking about how Kavita is like brings food to a lot of people on Thanksgiving instead of just eating a lot of food. So like it's good to walk the walk and talk the talk. So Kavita, how do you see kind of social good and blockchain kind of interacting as you do some of this impact investing?
Yeah, thank you for outing me out on my Thanksgiving plans. Uh, I think for me, when I started getting really interested in blockchain an year and a half back, it all started from a very social entrepreneurship perspective. I was working at the Eric Schmidt Family Foundation and was judging MIT Solve, which I've been advising for a year now. And I came across a project which was using identity on blockchain for refugees when they make the first entry into Turkey and Greece. And I was super blown out about the transparency, the data verification, then the use of that data to establish persons' education credibility, financial credibility, the location, the address, within 30 seconds to like 5 minutes. And I did not know much about blockchain at that point, so I kept on grilling the entrepreneur. But over
Mhm.
time, when I learned it, I was completely blown away. The traceability, sourceability, transparency, accountability, those ethos and more, which the whole blockchain ecosystem was built upon, irrespective of which one do you go for. And combining with that, years of my fintech investing experience, especially in Africa and Middle East, companies like M-Pesa, um, I have seen how remittance can change the whole economy of a lot of developing countries. And having a verified system on blockchain where you can actually remit to anywhere across the world within 30 seconds to a minute instead of 3 days to 15 days, and a fraction like 0.01% cost of what the current transactional cost is a very big social impact for me.
Yep.
So that's what got me really interested in blockchain and kept on looking into it. And then I got really lucky to meet Joseph Lubin at one of the IFC, very small curated uh, conference in San Francisco. And that just completely made me a convert.
Nice. Yeah. And I like you say, I mean, that remittance thing is so huge that money until about 45,000 bucks per year is very correlated with happiness. And so if there are people that are going in working places doing remittances, or whether it's a nonprofit like Give Directly, that initial money for people who are in poverty and what have you, isn't the financial inclusion, baking the unbanked. That's a crucial step one to like success within this global sphere. So I guess tell me a little bit more. One thing that's weird about this space though is thinking about value here, and I like to kind of dive into how people think about value. So, my example is if I give a rich person, let's say 1 unit of value, they may be able to give me $100 in return. But if I give kind of a poor person 1 unit of value, they can only give me like $1 in return. And so I feel like when you think about optimizing for things and whether you're optimizing for money or value or impact, how do you think about kind of the intersection of those concepts?
So, unfortunately, the volume of that poor people giving you $1 is way more than the rich people giving you $100,
Mhm.
right? Um, so I think it's a combination of market quantity versus the dollar amount per quantity, and also the service which you want to do, right? So there are projects like, for an example, let's take the example of remittance itself. Um, yes, if there is somebody remitting only $100, it's going to give me a $1. But then I would be able to actually test that model. I would be able to create a huge database and the credibility around it, and would be able to make a technology good enough for a big bank to start making a $10 million transaction using it. A bank
Mhm.
probably is not going to be my first customer for that platform until and unless it's really proven in the market, right? If you look at any of the fintech companies, like the mobile based currency digital transaction companies, they all started with very, very, very small, very small transactional communities, like 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents. With respect to social impact, I believe different companies and different entrepreneurs have different belief on where do they find the balance. There is no right or wrong, it's very relative. But
Mhm.
as an investor, I always believe that if you start in any companies with an impact layer to it as a defined layer which you really want, over time when the platform is going to grow, you're going to just increase it or grow the impact layer too. So
Yep.
where blockchain and Ethereum starts, for me, first of all, platform itself by thesis is very socially impact driven. Now taking it to the next level of creating applications which are even more focused on that, I believe the only way we can make an impact in a sustainable manner for long run is when we also have a defined financial plan around it so that everybody can survive and create the company to the next level.
Yep. I love that. I think that in some ways, what you were just discussing there is what Vinay Gupta, in one of his talks at DEF CON 1, what he calls this like structure and the meta structure above it, where you have Ethereum that allows for us to build applications on top of it. And then as we're building them, to kind of fund, to kind of put some of our money back into the infrastructure and to refund it and kind of have this nice loop between the structure and the meta structure above it that allows us to fund things. And I think that, like you said, that the impact layer, that Ethereum in and of itself, even if you're trying to do some kind of like evil thing on Ethereum or some kind of weird capitalist thing, it's like Ethereum itself is kind of an impact layer in and of itself. So I think that hopefully we'll get 2x returns, compounding returns when you take that Ethereum impact layer and then add in another impact layer. So thinking about that and kind of taking it to the companies that you invested in so far, do you want to tell me a little bit about some of the portfolio companies that you've invested in and maybe why you invested in them?
Yeah, so some of them we are still closing our deals, but let's talk about ones we for sure have.
Nice.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so we started with this really interesting fintech company where BlockFi, they are based out of New York. They are in crypto lending platform, and you're going to feel like it's coming from a very niche bubble of the crypto holders, but it will also help you realize what's the reality between the crypto world we live in and the world of US and New York we live in. Is
Mhm.
so BlockFi allows you to um, put your Ether or Bitcoin as a collateral, and then actually go up to 40% value of whatever your Ether is today to have it in fiat, for you to go and, if you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, buy without losing your Ether. And the founder, Zach, I really liked his story. He has been investing in crypto very early on. He has been a successful banker, a risk analyst, and he realized that when he wanted to actually buy a house, he cannot put his crypto as an asset in any of the banks. And that is what he was holding, knowing this is going to be the next generation economy. And then, as soon as he mentioned it, the banks actually went through extra layer of security checks on him, because for them this is drug money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not, we are not talking about 2 years back or 3 years back. And so we realized that if we do believe in this currency and in this platform, we also have to start creating uh, a lot of applications which are actually building the bridge between the traditional ecosystem and the new ecosystem. And the more bridge we create, the more it will be easier for the new ecosystem to get integrated into old one. So BlockFi is one of those ways where uh, we don't want people to sell their crypto if they don't want to, but still have a comfort of have day-to-day transaction in whatever currency is possible, with the rule of the law, of the land.
Got it.
Then the other one is Constamp, which we are like even working deeper and deeper with them. So lots of people are building up security contracts, and with those security contracts, there are uh, very few talented brains across the world who can actually go through deep checks on your smart contracts and creating the security layer around it. So Richard Ma, the founder of Quantstamp, came up with a very interesting model of doing auto security checks, which are digital way of doing it. So even if we use it as the first layer or the final sanity check layer, this is where the future is going to go, which is in the automated system. So we realized that this is going to be a great addition to like so many projects, portfolio companies, and any of the smart contract projects within ConsenSys system and outside, which could be used to support. So that was the thinking about along with Constamp. Then the other project which we are doing is Curio Cards, which is about digital arts. So I have been a personal art collector, and one of the biggest problem with the art pieces are always the verification, then insurance, and then transportation. But the world going forward is going to be all about digital art. How many of us today actually take the printouts or try to go through the old reel process? Everything is on our phones, right? So Curio cards provide artists to put the original piece which they have created and create the digital copy and sign and assign 50 cards or 60 cards or 5 cards for the whole lifetime of that particular piece. And it is all verified on the blockchain. So 20, 30, 50 years down the lane, anyone can have the original verified copy and can verify it in 30 seconds, whether it's the original or not. So those are sort of the project. Our ethos are that we want to invest in anything and everything on Ethereum blockchain across security, protocol, infrastructure, lots of application, exchanges, and create a circular economy within the portfolio that every company can feed off from each other, can help and support each other, and the whole ConsenSys ecosystem, both from ConsenSys and to ConsenSys, and ultimately to the Ethereum ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, I like and parts of that the bridge that first one reminds me a lot of Salt, where you can take your crypto and essentially leverage it to get fiat money to do things in the real world. And then the last one, yeah, I really like the idea. What was the name of the last one again?
Curio cards, CURIO CARD.
Curio cards.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, curio cards. Yeah, that reminds me of yeah, just this as we today we don't think of art too much as digital, but as we get deeper and deeper into this and as more like digital natives who essentially know the world in many ways digital first, yeah, exactly as you're saying, they're not necessarily going to want a Lamborghini. They're going to want a token that says that they own that Lamborghini, you know? And then they'll just hide it and they'll store it wherever. So we'll see if that's the future, and hopefully not too many tokenized Lamborghinis, but whatever. So how do you think about, for companies, you started talking about this again, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into it. companies that you're looking to invest in, what are some of the, I guess, what are some top tips that you would say as you've looked at a bunch of different companies? What are some tips that you'd say to blockchain entrepreneurs as they start to try to pitch VCs?
Um, I would say the era of just writing a white paper and thinking that that's all what is required is over. What I look for is why do you want blockchain? Because a lot of solutions which come to us is taking the um, traditional way of doing things, figuring out what's the gap and redundancies out there, and then taking care of it by using blockchain. So a very clear thought process of why do you want blockchain. If you are going to tokenize any part of it, how do you see the utilization of that token? Is that actually going to add value? Do you really need token? And then going back to what traditional investing has always been, the the problem, the solution, the vision around it, the two things which and the team, but the two things which I personally really look for is synergy. Are these people going to work with this bigger community of Ethereum or not? Because this particular community of purist technologists in the blockchain's ecosystem, they really work in a very big cooperative and synergical manner, and we only want to support um, players who going to come and work with everyone instead of trying to create their own silos and have a power play. So I think for us from ConsenSys, it's very, very important that we support a very synergical, collaborative atmosphere. So that's one. And the second thing is, um, we don't want companies, at least what I feel like, not to build everything. If you have five different parts or components which you require to achieve what you actually want to achieve, let's say you want identity, you want security, then you want MetaMask, you want a platform, you want a transactional layer on top of it, then how do you think through? Are you creating everything by yourself? Then you are 2 to 3 years down the lane and you still have to be perfect on every layer. Or how smart are you to start working and picking up the best solutions for all and focus on what you have to deliver? So I think those are the couple of things which we really look for. But we invest globally, so geography, location, or if there is a solution which is only for a particular community, that doesn't bother us because we want to be there. We completely decentralize as the blockchain is.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that and I feel like those two main points actually are very compatible with each other, which is like, hey, for people in the space, you got to be thinking from not the pure competition perspective, but from the co-opetition or co-evolving perspective. And part of that is to say, oh, I don't need to build identity, and I can actually be a great early adopter for this other company that is building identity, and we can kind of help them with their project, and we can tell them the bugs that are happening. So I think that, yeah, that kind of mindset of like rising tide lifts all boats and that kind of thing, I think is definitely crucial to this space, and is part of the space as well. So if you come in with this pure like evil competitive mindset or whatever, not necessarily evil, then you might get some pushback from people say, hey, the whole goal here is just to create a better world for everybody, and whether it's rent seeking, whether you're extracting or these kinds of things, that's not the mindset that we have. So I guess with that, Kavita, what else is on your top for the final question here? Anything else on the top of your mind, either from the venture capital perspective or from the, from the entrepreneurship perspective, or any kind of perspective? What's one final thing that's on your mind here?
Can I go with two?
Yes, totally allowed.
Thank you. We'll serve you food next Thanksgiving, too, Reese.
Nice. Okay, good. Yeah, exactly. I demand food.
So I think to to the venture world, I just want to say, um, let's have more conversation around different ways and different thought process towards investing into the blockchain community. And I'm saying this to all my friends and colleagues from the traditional investment space. It's a new technology. This is going to be the future, but it also requires a new way of investment, a new way of evaluating those technologies and the project. So let's work together and create a very informative way of how to do it, and how to bridge the traditional world with the new world and create a complete new amalgamation. And I think to the entrepreneurs, I just want to say, We are looking for the next awesome ideas, and we are looking anywhere from land titling and registration on blockchain to security products to health side, education sectors, voting side, anything and everything. Um, if you really think uh, your idea is going to actually change lives of million plus people, and you just need support, whether it's from technology or from investments, I think ConsenSys overall as the ecosystem is worth trying off. So that pretty much would be my two ask at the end from your audience.
Boom. Yeah, that's good. And I think on the first point, I just want to say that that to me sounds like similar to what you were saying at the entrepreneur level, where you're like looking for projects who are looking to be co-evolving and co-opetitioning with each other. And that thing is also true at the venture capital layer, where you say, hey, let's talk with each other about this. How should we do this? How should we make this bridge? That's crucial to us going forward as well. So thank you so much, Kavita, for your time. Yeah, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Reese. Take care. Thanks,
It
everyone.
was fun. And goodbye, everybody. And if you want to support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Rieslandmark. That's patreon.com/RHYSLINDMARK. Okay, goodbye.